The ticket was still on the dresser. She was supposed to be in Boston by now, some women's empowerment summit in a 3-star hotel near Logan Airport. But I turned off her alarm at 4:30 a.m., right before I unplugged her phone. And then, I sat in the kitchen for 3 hours, drinking her favorite vanilla oat milk latte from her favorite mug, waiting for her to come flying down the stairs in that frantic, chaotic way she always did when she had to be somewhere and had forgotten her necklace, or eyelashes, or truth. Except this time, she didn't forget anything. I did. I forgot how many signs I'd ignored. I forgot how long I'd been living in a house with someone who flinched every time I said, "I miss us." I forgot the taste of suspicion that had started to cling to my toothbrush. When she finally woke up, the panic hit her face like cold water. "You didn't wake me?" she gasped, frantically reaching for her dead phone. "No," I said. "I figured you'd enjoy being late to your new life." That's when she froze. Not like someone caught lying. More like someone who's been known completely. Without question, without wiggle room. She didn't even ask what I meant. She just whispered, "You went through my bag, didn't you?" No, I hadn't. Not until she said that. But I will. She left her suitcase by the door while calling the airline. That gave me all the permission I needed. In the outside zipper pocket, beneath a power bank and a half-used lip balm, I found a handwritten note folded twice. No name, no salutation, just 5 words. "Can't wait to taste you." No signature. I placed the note in front of her on the dining table, next to the mug she always said I wasn't allowed to use because it held memories. She didn't cry, didn't deny, didn't scream. All she said was, "Your happiness isn't my concern anymore." And that's when I stopped being her safety net. That's when I stopped being the husband who carried her bags and excused her absences and believed in her career retreats. That's when I decided if she wasn't going to care about my happiness, then I was done protecting her from the consequences of my silence. This was no longer a marriage. It was a performance, and I was finally stepping off stage. What came next made even her mother stop defending her. She left the house 2 hours later than planned. No luggage, no eye contact. She walked out the door like someone who had just been fired from a job they thought they'd retire from. Quiet, stunned, still pretending she had options. But I didn't follow her. I didn't ask where she was going. I didn't beg. I just closed the door gently and double-locked it behind her. Then I sat down at the kitchen table and stared at the folded note again. Not because I didn't believe what it said. I did, but because I was still trying to figure out who would be dumb enough to leave something so blatant in a suitcase they weren't even going to carry themselves. It felt sloppy. But she wasn't a sloppy person. That's what made everything worse. You know that feeling when you sense there's more? Like a splinter under your skin, small but deep enough to keep irritating the nerve? I had that. Couldn't let it go. I remembered she had synced her phone to our old tablet 2 years ago, back when we used it to play cartoons for our daughter during car rides. She never unsynced it. Probably forgot it even existed. I hadn't touched the thing in months. When I powered it on, it updated automatically. And then the photos started loading. Hundreds of them. Not just from Boston, but from Chicago, Nashville, Phoenix. Trips she told me were work conferences, weekends I spent with the kid while she worked with female founders. Most of the photos were harmless group shots, restaurant plates, scenic selfies. But then came the folder named Ellen. No, I almost didn't open it, but curiosity doesn't knock. Kicks down the door. The first photo was blurry, an arm slung across her shoulder, a man's jawline barely in frame. The second one was clearer. A rooftop bar, her in a black dress I'd never seen before, him behind her, chin on her neck. Third photo. A mirror selfie in a hotel bathroom, his bare back, her lips pressed to it. I didn't know who he was, but I recognized the location, a boutique hotel in Nashville we once stayed at for our anniversary. She took him to the same room. She even posed in front of the same mirror she once said made her feel like someone rich and in love. I could barely breathe, but I kept scrolling. The next thing I found wasn't a photo. It was a video. I won't get graphic. That's not what this post is about. But I will say this. It was intimate, casual, like they had done it dozens of times. She laughed in it. She used words she never used with me. And at one point, She looked directly into the camera and said, "This is our secret paradise." That was the moment I knew this wasn't just an affair. This was a double life, and I had been funding it. Flights on our joint card, outfits bought with emergency money. The yoga retreats just cover stories with a glossy feminist bow. But here's what really twisted the knife. At the end of the video, she got up, walked past the camera, and said something so casual it didn't hit me until I replayed it 3 times. "I'm so glad Everett's boring. Makes sneaking around easy. Everett. Me. That name that never rolled off the tongue. That man she married 11 years ago. It was a joke to her now, a convenience. I wanted to scream, to throw the tablet against the wall. But instead, I walked to the garage, grabbed a pen and paper, and started writing. Not a letter, not a breakup note, a list. A list of everything she'd taken for granted and everything I was about to take back. I wasn't going to ruin her. That wasn't the goal. But I was done protecting her reputation while she dismantled mine behind hotel curtains. She said my happiness wasn't her concern. Then it was time she experienced what happens when I stop pretending she's still the woman I married. I didn't say anything when she came back that night. She knocked first. That alone told me something had shifted. She never knocked on her own front door. It was 11 o'clock. She wore that face people put on when they've been caught but are still gambling on their charm to erase the consequences. She looked nervous, yes, but only in the way someone looks before asking for an awkward favor, not forgiveness. "I left my laptop inside," she said casually. That was it. No mention of the note, no questions, no apology, just a request. I didn't even look at her. I stepped aside and let her walk past, wondering if she knew I'd already seen her entire second life unfold in high-definition betrayal. She grabbed her laptop from the coffee table, her charger, too, then lingered. "Are you okay?" she asked, like she was speaking to a coworker who had sneezed. "I'm fine," I said flatly. Silence. Then she nodded once and left. I locked the door behind her. Slowly. That night I didn't sleep. I wrote. Not a letter, not a text. I started writing down passwords, contacts. Things she'd probably forgotten were in my name. Our mortgage. Both names, but I'd been paying it. Her car. Leased under my credit. Our daughter's school account. I was the primary guardian on every form. She'd built her freedom on the foundation of my quiet support. And now I was going to dismantle it, brick by brick, without a single fight, without shouting, without accusations. First, I closed the joint savings account, moved my portion, the one I had built over the last decade, into a new one. Then, I removed my access to the backup credit card she used to build points. I scheduled a meeting with the bank, told them I'd no longer be co-signing anything for Lorna. Then I made 2 calls. The first was to a divorce attorney I found through a coworker who'd gone through something similar last year. The second was to my mother, not to confess, not yet, but to ask if she'd be able to watch Becca for a couple of weekends coming up. She didn't ask questions. She just said yes. I wasn't planning revenge. I was preparing the reveal. 2 days later, she sent me a text. One line, "We need to talk tonight." I replied, "Sure. Come by after 8. Becca's staying with my mom." She showed up in a gray cardigan and jeans, hair pulled back, like she was trying to look soft, approachable, maybe even maternal. But the moment she sat down, the mask dropped. "I think we've both made mistakes," she began. "And I think we've grown apart in ways we couldn't have expected." I let her talk. She monologued for nearly 10 minutes, used words like growth, individual needs, and emotional seasons. It was like listening to a therapist's blog post read aloud by someone trying to win a breakup. Then she said the thing that lit a fire in my blood. "What if we just took a break, stayed married, but lived separately? Gave each other space to evolve?" I didn't flinch. I reached under the couch cushion and pulled out a manila envelope, slid it across the coffee table. "What's this?" she asked, suddenly wary. "Proof," I said, "that I already know everything and that I'm done evolving in a marriage where I'm the only one still trying." She opened it. Photos, screenshots, a timeline, names of hotels. Her voice from the video transcribed. It wasn't a confrontation. It was a presentation. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just turned pale, like she'd seen a future she no longer had access to. I stood up. You won't have to worry about space. You're getting all the space you need. And I'm taking back everything I gave you while you were building a second life. She whispered something. I think it was, Everett, please. But I was already walking to the door. I didn't slam it. I just left her there in the same silence I've been living in for far too long. What came next wasn't revenge. It was freedom, and I wasn't done claiming it. The next morning, she called 6 times before noon. I didn't answer, not out of spite. I just didn't want to hear her voice anymore. It wasn't even about anger. It was something colder, a kind of emotional exhaustion I didn't know existed until now. I didn't want explanations. I didn't want to hear her pretend to be sorry. I had lived in the noise of her justifications for so long that silence finally felt like power. Instead of picking up, I kept moving. I started packing my things that afternoon. Not hers, mine. I took what I came into the marriage with and what I had paid for. The house wasn't mine entirely, but my name was on the deed, and that would complicate things later. I knew that, but in this moment I didn't care. I just wanted my life back. Whatever pieces of it still belonged to me. I called my brother, Mason. We haven't always been close, but he came with his truck and didn't ask too many questions. He helped me move everything into a small rental about 30 minutes outside town. It smelled like old carpet and paint thinner, but for the first time in months, I could breathe. That night, Lorna showed up at the rental. I don't know how she found it. Maybe she tracked me. Maybe she guessed. Either way, I heard a knock around 10 p.m. and looked through the peephole to see her standing there. Hair down, no makeup, wearing the same sweatshirt she used to borrow from me on weekends. I opened the door halfway. You weren't supposed to leave, she said, like I had violated some unspoken rule of the game. I just looked at her. No reaction. You were supposed to fight me, she continued. Yell. Call me names. I expected you to, I don't know, throw a plate or something. I said nothing. Her eyes searched my face like she didn't recognize it. Maybe she didn't. Why are you angry? She asked, her voice cracking. I replied. For a long time. You just never noticed. And that broke her composure. She stepped forward, almost pleading. Everett, I made a mistake. I got lost. I didn't mean to. I held up my hand. You didn't get lost, I said calmly. You took a detour and liked it better. Don't insult me with metaphors. She flinched, took a step back. I think part of her still believed there was a version of this where I softened, where I reached out and forgave her because that's what she was used to. Me fixing things, patching holes, apologizing for shadows she created. But I didn't. You always said you wanted freedom, I continued. Well, here it is. You're free and I'm done. She looked around the apartment, probably taking in how bare it was, how temporary. Like maybe she thought that meant I'd come crawling back once I got tired of microwave dinners and folding chairs. But I think what really hit her was this. I had stopped needing her permission to move on. I'm still your wife, she said softly, almost like it was a threat wrapped in nostalgia. No, I replied. You were my wife. Now you're just someone I used to protect. That ended the conversation. She left without saying goodbye. I stood at the door for a while, not sad, not relieved, just empty. But not the bad kind of empty, more like a cleared-out space where something new could finally grow. Over the next week, I made changes, big ones. I pulled my name from every shared account. I hired a lawyer with a reputation for being ruthless but fair. I told my boss what had happened and asked for a transfer to the other regional office. They gave it to me. Just like that, a new role, a fresh start, a new city. But then, on the day I handed over the divorce papers to her in person, she dropped a sentence so sharp it nearly undid everything I'd rebuilt. I hope you know, she said. He left me too. I blinked. The man you saw in those pictures. The one from the trips. He found out I was married. Said he didn't want the drama. I said nothing. What was there to say? I lost everything, she whispered. I looked her dead in the eyes and replied, No, you gave everything away. There's a difference. She stood there for a moment like she was about to argue, but then she just nodded and walked away. And that's when I realized something. Her worst punishment wasn't me leaving. It was me never looking back. 2 months after the papers were served, I got a message from an unknown number. Just one line, "Hey, thought of you today. Still remember your hands." I stared at it for 5 minutes. Not because I didn't know who it was from. I did. But because I couldn't believe she thought that would work. She was testing the waters. That was her game now. Not apology, not ownership, just nostalgia weaponized. I didn't respond, but she didn't stop. A few days later, I ran into her at the pharmacy. She looked different, not in a dramatic way but calculated. New haircut, soft makeup, a flowy cardigan. Like she was starring in her own second-chance rom-com. She even used a tone I hadn't heard since the first year of our marriage. Gentle, light, like the months of betrayal had been a bad dream we both imagined. "You look good," she said, pretending to glance casually at my basket, full of allergy meds and cereal bars. "Didn't ask," I replied and tried to walk past. She stepped in front of me. "I'm just trying to talk." "That's the problem," I said. "You never tried to listen." Her smile faltered, and I thought that would be the end of it, but it wasn't. She started showing up in ways that felt deliberate. At the coffee shop I've been going to since the move, at the dog park, even though she never liked dogs. Once, she even mailed me a birthday card and signed it with a quote from some poet about roads that return to themselves. But all of it felt off. She wasn't trying to rebuild anything. She was trying to rewrite the narrative, to turn herself into the ex-wife who had just lost her way, not the one who packed her guilt into hotel rooms across state lines. She told her friends I was cold now, that I shut her out, that I refused to heal, as if healing was supposed to involve letting her crawl back through a window after torching the front door. And then came the dinner invite. She asked if I'd meet her for closure, said she'd made a reservation, just one night. No pressure, just 2 people who shared a past. I told her I'd think about it. I didn't. I sent her one final message the next morning. "The man you married would have come. The man you betrayed won't." Then I blocked her, and that was it. Or at least I thought it was, until a week later someone new reached out. Not a friend, not a lawyer. Someone who said, "You don't know me, but you need to hear what she's been saying about you." And suddenly, the fallout I thought was over wasn't. The message came from a guy named Ty. His profile picture was nothing special, blurry, probably cropped from a group photo at some bar. I almost ignored it until I noticed one detail in his bio. Briar Falls High, class of '01. Same as Lorna. His message was short. "I've heard things. Stuff you probably should have known months ago. Can we talk?" I didn't know this guy anything, but curiosity is a loud voice. I said, "Sure." We met at a diner just off the highway, the kind of place where secrets feel safer over greasy food and old jukebox songs. Ty showed up with the look of someone who regretted getting involved the moment he walked through the door. Nervous, jumpy, eyes darting. But once he sat down, he didn't waste time. "I dated Lorna before you did," he said. "Like way before, high school into early college." That didn't surprise me. I'd heard mentions. But what did surprise me was what he said next. "She's telling people you were abusive, controlling, that you stalked her after the divorce." I stared at him. He kept talking. "I bumped into her at something 2 weeks ago. We caught up. She made it sound like you were this unstable, obsessive guy. Said she had to escape you, that you used to lock her out of accounts, isolate her." I felt the blood leave my face. He saw the reaction and leaned in. But that didn't match the person she used to talk about. Not even close. So, I did some asking around, mutuals, old friends. "She's building a version of the story where she's the victim, and you're the villain." Classic projection. I didn't know what to say. Not because I doubted it, but because part of me had been waiting for this. I had feared it from the moment I handed her the divorce papers, that she wouldn't take the truth quietly, that she'd twist the ending into something she could survive. "I'm not trying to stir things up," Ty added. "I just figured you deserved a heads up. People believe the first version they hear." I nodded, thanked him, paid for his coffee. On the drive home, my mind raced. She was rewriting the past while I was trying to heal from it. And it hit me. If I stayed silent, her version would become the official one. She'd go on with her life, playing the brave woman who freed herself, while I'd be nothing but a whispered cautionary tale. So I made a decision. I wasn't going to defend myself. I was going to show people who I was without dragging her through the mud, without bitterness. I started a journal, not for venting, for truth. Documented everything: dates, screenshots, receipts, emails. I compiled it into a private timeline just in case. I wasn't going to publish it, but if anyone ever asked, really asked, I'd be ready. And it wasn't long before someone did, because someone else had started asking questions. But this time it wasn't about me. It was about her. A few days later, I got a message from a woman named Hi. No introduction, no background, just, "Is this Everett? I think you and I have something in common. Lorna." That alone made my stomach tighten. I replied cautiously, asked what she meant. Her response came quickly. "I was dating the guy she cheated on you with." She didn't know about me, that is. Turns out, Hi had been with him for over a year. Long distance, met through mutual friends. She had started to notice changes in his behavior. Weird schedule shifts, phone always flipped down, constant travel for work. She brushed it off at first, but things stopped adding up. So, she did what Lorna never thought anyone would do. She checked his Venmo history. Hotel rooms, wine bars, a spa weekend in Nashville labeled self-care getaway. But here's the kicker: there were selfies. Lorna had sent him a few, and he, being an idiot, saved them to a shared folder in the cloud that Hi still had access to from a trip they'd taken together. She saw everything. Not just photos, but screenshots of their texts. Some of the things he said to Lorna, sickening. But what really cracked Hi open, and why she reached out to me, was the way Lorna talked about me. "She called you safe," Hi wrote. "Said being married to you was like sleeping in a guest room every night. Clean, quiet, but cold." And then, she added, "She told him she married you because she needed a life raft. You were the raft." I sat there staring at the message, hands shaking, not because of the insult. I'd been through worse, but because it finally made everything click. She never loved me. She needed me for stability, for structure, for shelter. And the second she found a new flotation device, she didn't just let go. She pushed me under. Hi and I ended up talking on the phone for almost 2 hours. It was strange, bonding with a stranger over shared betrayal, but it felt honest. No spin, no drama, just two people piecing together the same jigsaw puzzle from opposite corners. She asked if I wanted to confront them together, some dramatic showdown. I said, no, that part of me was gone. But I thanked her genuinely because she gave me something Lorna never did: clarity. That weekend, I drove out to the edge of Briar Falls. There's a cliff that overlooks the water tower and most of the town. It's quiet, peaceful. I used to go there before I proposed to Lorna, thinking it would be the place I'd tell her I wanted forever. This time I stood alone. I pulled the last photo I had of us from my wallet, a worn-out Polaroid from a beach trip 8 years ago, and let it slip through my fingers into the wind. Not out of anger, just finality. I wasn't her raft anymore, and I didn't need to be anyone else's. 6 months passed. Not all at once. Slowly, like layers peeling away from something I'd wrapped too tightly for too long. Grief, resentment, confusion. They faded one layer at a time, and underneath, something quiet started to grow. Not joy, not yet, just peace. I stopped counting how many days it had been since the divorce was finalized. I stopped checking her socials. I stopped wondering what people thought, who believed what, whether her story won over mine. Because the truth is, the people who mattered already knew. And the ones who didn't, I wasn't living for them anymore. I started doing small things that used to feel too quiet to matter. Mornings alone with coffee, actual breakfasts instead of half-warm cereal, walking around the farmer's market and not feeling like I was missing something just because no one's hand was in mine. Becca came to stay with me more often. At first, it was weekends, then weekdays. She'd curl up on the couch watching cartoons, telling me about school drama I barely understood. And I'd sit there thinking, this is the only relationship I should have been fighting for. And then came something unexpected. Not a new love, not fireworks, just a woman named Camille, who ran the bookstore down the street from my new apartment. She remembered my name after I stopped in twice. She asked what kind of books I liked. She smiled without checking her reflection afterward. One day, she handed me a novel and said, "You look like someone who deserves a better ending." I laughed, awkward as ever, but I read the book, then another. Then we started walking together on Sundays. She never asked about my past. I eventually told her, but when I did, she didn't flinch, didn't offer cliches or pity. She just said, "Sounds like she lost something important." She didn't mean me. She meant me now. The man who no longer needed validation to feel valued. The man who no longer mistook being needed for being loved. The man who could look back without collapsing. And that's the thing. Lorna didn't break me. She broke the illusion I had built around her. And once that was gone, I realized I wasn't meant to be someone's life raft. I was meant to build my own boat. And now, I'm finally steering it somewhere I chose, not where someone else needed me to float. So yeah, my wife once told me, "Your happiness isn't my concern."